Welcome to RLP Audiobooks channel, the channel that brings forgotten books back to life in audio format, so you can listen to whenever and wherever you desire, whether you're driving, chilling, and even sleeping. Please consider subscribing to the channel and click the notifications button so you don't miss out on any other videos. Now, relax, listen, ponder, and enjoy.
Surah 59. Al-Hashr. Context. Period of revelation. Bukhari and Muslim contain a hadith from Sa'id bin Jubair, to the effect:
When I asked Abdullah bin Abbas about Surah Al-Hashr, he replied that it was sent down concerning the battle against the Banu Nadir, just as Surah 8, Al-Anfal, was sent down concerning the battle of Badr.
As for the question as to when this battle took place, Imam Zuhri has stated on the authority of Urwa bin Zubair that it took place 6 months after the Battle of Badr. However, Ibn Sa'd, Ibn Hisham, and Balad-Hurari regard it as an event of Rabi al-Awwal, 4 after Hijrah. The historical background. In order to understand the subject matter of this surah, it is necessary to have a look at the history of Medina and the Jews of the Arabian Peninsula,
Hijaz.
For without it, one cannot know precisely the real causes of the Prophet's dealings with their different tribes, the way he did. No authentic history of the Arabian Jews exists in the world. They have not left any writing of their own in the form of a book or a tablet, which might throw light on their past, nor have the Jewish historians and writers of the non-Arab world made any mention of them, the reason being that after their settlement in the Arabian Peninsula, they had detached themselves from the main body of the nation, and the Jews of the world did not count them as among themselves. For they had given up Hebrew culture and language, even the names, and adopted Arabism instead. In the tablets that have been unearthed in the archaeological research in the Arabian Peninsula, no trace of the Jews is found before the 1st century of the Christian era, except for a few Jewish names. Therefore, the history of the Arabian Jews is based mostly on the verbal traditions prevalent among the Arabs, most of which are bad, and have been spread by the Jews themselves. The Jews of the Arabian Peninsula claimed that they had come to settle in Arabia during the last stage of the life of the prophet Moses. They said that the prophet Moses had dispatched an army to expel the Amalekites from the land of Yathrib,
previous name of Medina,
and had commanded it not to spare even a single soul of that tribe. The Israelite army carried out the prophet's command, but spared the life of a handsome prince of the Amalekite king, and returned with him to Palestine. By that time, the prophet Moses had passed away. His successors took great exception to what the army had done, for by sparing the life of an Amalekite, it had clearly disobeyed the prophet and violated the Mosaic law. Consequently, they excluded the army from their community, and it had to return to Yathrib and settle there forever. Thus, the Jews claimed that they had been living in Yathrib since about 1200 BC. But this had in fact no historical basis, and probably the Jews had invented this story in order to overawe the Arabs into believing that they were of noble lineage, and the original inhabitants of the land. The second Jewish immigration, according to the Jews, took place in 587 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, destroyed Jerusalem and dispersed the Jews throughout the world. The Arab Jews said that several of their tribes at that time had come to settle in Wadi al-Qura, Taimah, and Yathrib. But this too has no historical basis. By this also, they might have wanted to prove that they were the original settlers of the area. As a matter of fact, what is established is that when in 70 CE, the Romans massacred the Jews in Palestine, and then in 132 CE, expelled them from that land, many of the Jewish tribes fled to find an asylum in the Arabian Peninsula, a territory that was contiguous to Palestine in the south. There, they settled wherever they found water springs and greenery, and then by intrigue and through money-lending businesses, gradually occupied the fertile lands. Ayla, Machna, Tabuk, Taimah, Wadi al-Qura, Fadak, and Khyber, came under their control in that very period, and Banu Quraytha, Banu Nadir, Bani Badal, and Bani Kainuqa also came in the same period, and occupied Yathrib. Among the tribes that settled in Yathrib, the Banu Nadir and the Banu Quraytha were more prominent, for they belonged to the Kohen, or priest class. They were looked upon as of noble descent, and enjoyed religious leadership among their co-religionists. When they came to settle in Yathrib, there were some other tribes living there before, whom they subdued, and became practically the owners of this green and fertile land. About 3 centuries later, in 450 or 451 CE, the Great Flood of Yemen occurred, which has been mentioned in verses 16 to 17 of Surah 34, Saba. As a result of this, different tribes of the people of Saba were compelled to leave Yemen and disperse in different parts of Arabia. Thus, the Bani Ghassan went to settle in Syria, Bani Laham in Iraq, Bani Khuzai between Jeddah and Mecca, and the Aus and the Hazraj went to settle in Yathrib. As Yathrib was under Jewish domination, they at first did not allow the Aus and the Hazraj to gain a footing, and the 2 Arab tribes had to settle on lands that had not yet been brought under cultivation, where they could hardly produce just enough to enable them to survive. At last, one of their chiefs went to Syria to ask for the assistance of their Ghassanite brothers. He brought an army from there and broke the power of the Jews. Thus, the Aus and the Hazraj were able to gain complete dominance over Yathrib, with the result that 2 of the major Jewish tribes, Banu Nadir and Banu Quraytha, were forced to take quarters outside the city. Since the 3rd tribe, Bani Kainuqa, was not on friendly terms with the other 2 tribes, it stayed inside the city as usual, but had to seek protection of the Hazraj tribe. As a countermeasure to this, Banu Nadir and Banu Quraytha took protection of the Aus tribe, so that they could live in peace in the suburbs of Yathrib. Before the Prophet's arrival at Medina, until his emigration, the following were the main features of the Jews' position in Arabian Peninsula in general, and in Medina,
Yathrib,
in particular. Number 1. In the matter of language, dress, civilization and way of life, they had completely adopted Arabism. Even their names had become Arabian. Of the 12 Jewish tribes that had settled in the Arabian Peninsula, none except the Bani Zorah retained its Hebrew name. Except for a few scattered scholars, none knew Hebrew. In fact, there is nothing in the poetry of the Jewish poets of the pre-Islamic days to distinguish it from the poetry of the Arab poets, in language, ideas, and themes. They even intermarried with the Arabs. In fact, nothing distinguished them from the common Arabs, except religion. Notwithstanding this, they had not lost their identity among the Arabs, and had kept their Jewish prejudice alive, most ardently and jealously. They had adopted superficial Arabism, because they could not survive in Arabia without it. Number 2. Because of this Arabism, the Western Orientalists have been misled into thinking that perhaps they were not really Israelites but Arabs, who had embraced Judaism, or that at least, majority of them consisted of the Arab Jews. But there is no historical proof to show that the Jews ever engaged in any proselytizing activities in the Arabian Peninsula, or their rabbis invited the Arabs to embrace Judaism, like the Christian priests and missionaries. On the contrary, we see that they prided themselves upon their Israelite descent and racial prejudices. They called the Arabs the Gentiles, which did not mean illiterate or uneducated, but savage and uncivilized people. They believed that the Gentiles did not possess any human rights. These were only reserved for the Israelites, and therefore, it was lawful and right for the Israelites to defraud them of their properties. Apart from the Arab chiefs, They did not consider the common Arabs fit enough to have equal status with them, even if they entered Judaism. No historical proof is available, nor is there any evidence in the Arabian traditions that some Arab tribe or prominent clan might have accepted Judaism. However, mention has been made of some individuals who would become Jews. The Jews, however, were more interested in their trade and business than in the preaching of their religion. That is why Judaism did not spread as a religion and creed in the Arabian Peninsula, but remained only as a mark of pride and distinction of a few Israelite tribes. The Jewish rabbis, however, had a flourishing business in granting amulets and charms, fortune-telling, and sorcery, because of which they were held in great awe by the Arabs for their knowledge and practical wisdom. Number 3. Economically, they were much stronger than the Arabs. Since they had emigrated from more civilized and culturally advanced countries of Palestine and Syria, they knew many such arts as were unknown to the Arabs. They also enjoyed trade relations with the outside world. Hence, they had captured the business of importing grain in Yathrib and the Upper Arabian Peninsula, and exporting dry dates to other countries. Poultry farming and fishing also were mostly under their controls. They were good at cloth weaving too. They had also set up wine shops here and there, where they sold wine which they imported from Syria. The Bani Kanoka generally practiced crafts, such as that of the goldsmith, blacksmith, and vessel makers. In all these occupations, trade, and business, these Jews earned excessive profits. But their chief occupation was trading and money lending, in which they had ensnared the Arabs of the surrounding areas. More particularly, the chiefs and elders of the Arab tribes who were given to a life of pomp, bragging, and boasting on the strength of borrowed money, were deeply indebted to them. They lent money on high rates of interest, and then would charge compound interest, which one could hardly clear off once one was involved in it. Thus, they had rendered the Arabs economically hollow, but it had naturally induced a deep-rooted hatred among the common Arabs against the Jews. Number 4. The demand of their trade and economic interests was that they should neither estrange one Arab tribe by befriending another, nor take part in their mutual wars. But, on the other hand, it was also in their interests that they should not allow the Arabs to be united, and should keep them fighting and entrenched against each other, for they knew that whenever the Arab tribes united, they would not allow them to remain in possession of their large properties, gardens, and fertile lands, which they had come to own through their profiteering and money-lending business. Furthermore, each of their tribes also had to enter into alliance with one or another powerful Arab tribe, for the sake of its own protection, so that no other powerful tribe should overawe it by its might. Because of this, they had not only to take part in the mutual wars of the Arabs, but they often had to go to war in support of the Arab tribe, to which their tribe was tied in alliance, against another Jewish tribe which was allied to the enemy tribe. In Yathrib, the Banu Quraitha and the Banu Nadir were the allies of the Aus, while the Bani Kanoka of the Hazraj. A little before the Prophet's emigration, these Jewish tribes had confronted each other, in support of their respective allies, in the bloody war that took place between the Aus and the Hazraj, at Bu'ath. Such were the conditions when Islam came to Medina, and ultimately an Islamic state came into existence, after the Prophet's arrival there. One of the first things that he accomplished, soon after establishing the state, was unification of the Aus and the Hazraj, and the emigrants into a brotherhood. The second was that he concluded a treaty between the Muslims and the Jews, on definite conditions, in which it was pledged that neither party would encroach on the rights of the other, and both would unite in a joint defense against the external enemies. Some important clauses of this treaty are as follows, which clearly show what the Jews and the Muslims had pledged to adhere to in their mutual relationship.
The Jews must bear their expenses, and the Muslims their expenses. Each must help the other against anyone who attacks the people of this document. They must seek mutual advice and consultation, and loyalty as a protection against treachery. They shall sincerely wish one another well. Their relations will be governed by piety and recognition of the rights of others, and not by sin and wrongdoing. The wronged must be helped. The Jews must pay the cost of war, along with the believers, so long as war lasts. Yathrib shall be a sanctuary for the people of this document. If any dispute or controversy, likely to cause trouble, should arise, it must be referred to God and to Muhammad, the apostle of God. Quraysh and their helpers shall not be given protection. The contracting parties are bound to help one another against any attack on Yathrib. Everyone shall be responsible for the defense of the portion to which he belongs. For reference, see Ibn Hisham, Volume 2, pages 147 to 150.
This was an absolute and definitive covenant, to the conditions of which the Jews themselves had agreed. But not very long after this, they began to show hostility towards the Prophet of God, and Islam, and the Muslims, and their hostility and perverseness went on increasing day by day. Its main causes were three. First, they envisaged the Prophet merely as a chief of his people, who should be content to have concluded a political agreement with them, and should only concern himself with the worldly interests of his group. But they found that he was extending an invitation to belief in God, and the apostleship, and the book, which also included belief in their own prophets and scriptures, and was urging the people to give up disobedience of God, and adopt obedience to the divine commands, and abide by the moral laws of their own prophets. This they could not put up with. They feared that if this universal ideological movement gained momentum, it would destroy their rigid religiosity, and wipe out their racial nationhood. Second, when they saw that the Aus and the Hazraj and the emigrants were uniting into a brotherhood, and the people from the Arab tribes of the surrounding areas,
who entered Islam,
were also joining this Islamic Brotherhood of Medina, and forming a religious community, they feared that the selfish policy that they had been following, of sowing discord between the Arab tribes, for the promotion of their own well-being and interests for centuries, would not work in the new system, but they would face a united front of the Arabs, against which their scheming and machinations would not succeed. Third, the work that the messenger of God was carrying out of reforming the society and civilization included putting an end to all unlawful methods in business and mutual dealings. More than that, he had declared taking and giving of interest also as impure and unlawful earning. This caused them the fear that if his rule became established in Arabia, he would declare interest legally forbidden, and in this, they saw their own economic disaster and death. For these reasons, they made resistance and opposition to the Prophet, their national ideal. They would never hesitate to employ any trick and machination, any device and cunning, to harm him. They spread every kind of falsehood, so as to cause distrust against him in the people's minds. They created every kind of doubt, suspicion, and misgiving in the hearts of the new reverts, so as to turn them back from Islam. They would make false profession of Islam, and then would turn apostate, so that it may engender more and more misunderstandings among the people against Islam and the Prophet. They would conspire with the hypocrites to create mischief, and would cooperate with every group and tribe hostile to Islam. They would create rifts between the Muslims, and would do whatever they could to stir them up to mutual feuds and fighting. The people of the Aus and the Hazraj tribes were their special target, with whom they had been allied for centuries. Making mention of the war of Bu'ath before them, they would remind them of their previous enmities, so that they might again resort to the sword against each other, and shatter their bond of brotherhood into which Islam had bound them. They would resort to every kind of deceit and fraud, in order to harm the Muslims economically. Whenever one of those with whom they had business dealings would accept Islam, they would do whatever they could to cause him financial loss. If he owed them something, They would worry and harass him by making repeated demands, and if they owed him something, they would withhold the payment and would publicly say that at the time the bargain was made he professed a different religion, and since he had changed his religion, they were no longer under any obligation towards him. Several instances of this nature have been cited in the explanation of verse 75 of Surah 3, Al-Imran, given in the commentaries by Tabari, Nisaburi, and in Ruh al-Mayuni. They had adopted this hostile attitude against the covenant, even before the Battle of Badr. But when the Prophet and the Muslims won a decisive victory over the Quraysh at Badr, they were filled with grief and anguish, malice and anger. They were in fact anticipating that in that war, the powerful Quraysh would deal a death blow to the Muslims. That is why, even before the news of the Islamic victory reached Medina, they had begun to spread the rumor that the Prophet had fallen a martyr, and the Muslims had been routed, and the Quraysh army under Abu Jahl was advancing on Medina. But when the battle was decided against their hopes and wishes, they burst with anger and grief. Ka'b bin Ashraf, the chief of the Banu Nadir, cried out,
"By God, if Muhammad has actually killed these nobles of Arabia, the earth's belly would be better for us than its back."
Then he went to Mecca and incited the people to vengeance by writing and reciting provocative elegies for the Quraysh chiefs killed at Badr. Then he returned to Medina and composed lyrical verses of an insulting nature about the Muslim women. At last, enraged with his mischief, the Prophet sent Muhammad bin Maslama Ansari in Rabi al-Awwal, 3 after Hijrah, and had him slain. The first Jewish tribe, which,
after the Battle of Badr,
openly and collectively broke their covenant, were the Bani Qaynuqa. They lived in a locality inside the city of Medina. As they practiced the crafts of the goldsmith, blacksmith, and vessel makers, the people of Medina had to visit their shops fairly frequently. They were proud of their bravery and valor. Being blacksmiths by profession, even their children were well armed, and they could instantly muster 700 fighting men from among themselves. They were also arrogantly aware that they enjoyed relations of confederacy with the Hazraj, and Abdullah bin Ubay, the chief of the Hazraj, who was their chief supporter. At the victory of Badr, they became so provoked that they began to trouble and harass the Muslims, and their women in particular, who visited their shops. Things came to such a pass that one day a Muslim woman was stripped naked publicly in the marketplace. This led to a brawl, in which a Muslim and a Jew were killed. Thereupon the Prophet himself visited their locality, got them together and counseled them on decent conduct. But the reply that they gave was,
"O Muhammad, you perhaps think we are like the Quraysh. They did not know fighting, therefore you overpowered them. But when you come in contact with us, you will see how men fight."
This was in clear words a declaration of war. Consequently, the Prophet laid siege to their quarters towards the end of Shawwal, and according to some others, of Zulqa'dah, 2 after Hijrah. The siege had hardly lasted for a fortnight, when they surrendered, and all their fighting men were tied and taken prisoners. Now Abdullah bin Ubay came up in support of them and insisted that they should be pardoned. The Prophet conceded his request and decided that the Bani Qaynuqa would be exiled from Medina, leaving their properties, armor, and tools of trade behind.
For reference see Ibn Sa'd, Ibn Hisham, Tariq Tabari.
For some time after these punitive measures,
the banishment of the Bani Qaynuqa, and killing of Ka'b bin Ashraf,
the Jews remained so terror-stricken that they did not dare commit any further mischief. But later, when in Shawwal, 3 after Hijrah, the Quraysh, in order to avenge themselves for the defeat at Badr, marched against Medina with great preparations, and the Jews saw that only 1,000 men had marched out with the Prophet, against 3,000 men of the Quraysh, and even they were deserted by 300 hypocrites who returned to Medina. They committed the first and open breach of the treaty, by refusing to join the Prophet in the defense of the city, although they were bound to it. Then, when in the Battle of Uhud, the Muslims suffered reverses, they were further emboldened. So much so that the Banu Nadir made a secret plan to kill the Prophet, though the plan failed before it could be executed. According to the details, after the incident of Bir Mauna, Safar, 4 after Hijrah, Amr bin Umayyad Amri killed by mistake 2 men of the Bani Amir in retaliation, who actually belonged to a tribe which was allied to the Muslims. But Amr had mistaken them for the men of the enemy. Because of this mistake, their blood money became obligatory on the Muslims. Since the Banu Nadir were also a party in the alliance with the Bani Amir, the Prophet went to their clan along with some of his companions, to ask for their help in paying the blood money. Outwardly they agreed to contribute, as he wished. But secretly they plotted that a person should go up to the top of the house by whose wall the Prophet was sitting, and drop a rock on him, to kill him. But before they could execute their plan, God informed him in time, and he immediately got up and returned to Medina. Now there was no question of showing them any further concession. The Prophet at once sent to them the ultimatum, that the treachery they had meditated against him had come to his knowledge. Therefore they were to leave Medina within 10 days. If any one of them was found staying behind in their quarters, he would be put to the sword. Meanwhile Abdullah bin Ubay sent them the message that he would help them with 2,000 men, and that the Banu Quraitha and Banu Ghatafan also would come to their aid, therefore they should stand firm and should not go. On this false assurance, they responded to the Prophet's ultimatum saying that they would not leave Medina and he could do whatever was in his power. Consequently in Rabi al-Awwal, 4 after Hijrah, the Prophet laid siege to them, and after a few days of the siege, which according to some traditions were 6, and according to others 15 days, they agreed to leave Medina on the condition that they could retain all their property which they could carry on the camels, except the armor. Thus, Medina was rid of this second mischievous tribe of Jews. Only 2 people from the Banu Nadir stayed. Because they became Muslims, others went to Syria and Khyber. The theme and subject matter. The theme of the surah as stated above, is an appraisal of the battle against the Banu Nadir. In this on the whole, 4 things have been discussed. Number 1. In the first 4 verses, the world has been admonished to take heed of the fate that had just befallen the Banu Nadir, a major tribe which was as strong in numbers as the Muslims, whose people boasted of far more wealth and possession, who were by no means ill-equipped militarily and whose forts were well fortified, could not stand siege even for a few days, and expressed their readiness to accept banishment from their centuries-old well-established settlement, even though not a single man from among them was slain. God says that this happened not because of any power possessed by the Muslims, but because the Jews had tried to resist and fight God and His messenger, and those who dare to resist the power of God always meet with the same fate. Number 2. In verse 5, the rule of the law of war that has been enunciated is, the destruction caused in the enemy territory for military purposes does not come under
spreading mischief on the earth.
Number 3. In verses 6 to 10, it has been stated how the lands and properties which come under the control of the Islamic State, as a result of war or peace terms, are to be managed, as it was the first ever occasion that the Muslims took control of a conquered territory. The law concerning it was laid down for their guidance. Number 4. In verses 11 to 17, the attitude that the hypocrites had adopted on the occasion of the battle against the Banu Nadir has been reviewed, and the causes underlying it have been pointed out. Number 5. The whole of the last section, verses 18 to 24, is an admonition for all those people who had professed to have affirmed the faith and joined the Muslim community, but were devoid of the true spirit of the faith. In it they have been told, what is the real demand of the faith? What is the real difference between piety and wickedness? What is the place and importance of the Qur'an, which they profess to believe in, and what are the attributes of God, in whom they claim to have believed? Surah 59. Al-Hashr.
The gathering.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Whatever is in the heavens, and whatever is on the earth, exalts God.
By praising Him, and declaring Him far above and beyond any failure or imperfection.
And He is the exalted in might, the wise. It is He who expelled the ones who disbelieved among the people of the book.
Referring to the Jews of Banu Nadir, who broke their pact with the messenger of God.
From their homes at the first gathering.
This was the first time they had ever been gathered and expelled.
You did not think they would leave, and they thought that their fortresses would protect them from God. But the decree of God came upon them, from where they had not expected. And He cast terror into their hearts, so they destroyed their houses by their own hands and the hands of the believers. So take warning, O people of vision. And if not that God had decreed for them exile, He would have punished them in this world, and for them in the hereafter is the punishment of the fire. That is because they opposed God and His messenger. And whoever opposes God, then indeed God is severe in retribution. Whatever you have cut down of their palm trees, or left standing on their trunks, it was by permission of God, and so He would disgrace the defiantly disobedient. And what God restored of property to His messenger from them, you did not spur for it in an expedition, any horses or camels.
Meaning, that they went through no hardship, for example war, to obtain it.
But God gives His messengers power over whom He wills, and God is over all things, competent. And what God restored to His messenger from the people of the towns, it is for God and for the messenger and for his near relatives.
Those of Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib, whom He, Muhammad, had prohibited from accepting zakat.
And orphans and the stranded traveler.
This ruling concerning properties abandoned by an enemy, without a war effort, differs from that in Surah Al-Anfal, verse 41, which refers to spoils of war, in which 4/5 is distributed among those who fought in God's cause.
So that it will not be a perpetual distribution among the rich from among you. And whatever the messenger has given you, take, and what he has forbidden you, refrain from. And fear God, indeed God is severe in retribution. For the poor emigrants who are expelled from their homes and their properties, seeking bounty from God and His pleasure, and supporting God and His messenger, there is also a share. Those are the truthful. And also for those who are settled in the home.
Al-Madinah.
And adopted the faith before them.
Before the settlement of the emigrants, Muhajirin, among the Ansar, for whom a share is delegated as well.
They love those who emigrated to them, and find not any want in their breasts of what they,
the emigrants,
were given, but give them preference over themselves, even though they are in privation. And whoever is protected from the stinginess of his soul, it is those who will be the successful. And there is a share for those who came after them, saying, Our Lord, forgive us and our brothers, who preceded us in faith, and put not in our hearts any resentment toward those who have believed. Our Lord, indeed you are kind and merciful. Have you not considered those who practice hypocrisy, saying to their brothers,
associates,
who have disbelieved among the people of the book, if you are expelled, we will surely leave with you, and we will not obey.
In regard to you,
anyone, ever, and if you are fought, we will surely aid you. But God testifies that they are liars. If they are expelled, they will not leave with them, and if they are fought, they will not aid them. And even if they should aid them, they will surely turn their backs, then thereafter, they will not be helped. You believers are more feared within their breasts than God. That is because they are a people who do not understand. They will not fight you all, except within fortified cities or from behind walls. Their violence,
enmity,
among themselves is severe. You think they are together, but their hearts are diverse. That is because they are a people who do not reason. Theirs is like the example of those shortly before them. They tasted the bad consequence of their affair, and they will have a painful punishment. The hypocrites are like the example of Satan when he says to the human being, "Disbelieve." But when he disbelieves, he says, "Indeed I am disassociated from you. Indeed I fear God, Lord of the worlds." So the outcome for both of them is that they will be in the fire, abiding eternally therein. And that is the recompense of the wrongdoers. O you, who have believed, fear God. And let every soul look to what it has put forth for tomorrow, and fear God. Indeed God is acquainted with what you do. And be not like those who forgot God, so he made them forget themselves. Those are the defiantly disobedient. Not equal are the companions of the fire and the companions of paradise. The companions of paradise, they are the attainers of success. If we had sent down this Qur'an upon a mountain, you would have seen it humbled and split asunder from fear of God. And these examples we present to the people, that perhaps they will give thought. He is God, other than whom there is no deity, knower of the unseen and the witnessed.
Meaning, what is the present, visible, and known to man? The knowledge of God includes the reality of all things and all occurrences, no matter how they might appear to human beings.
He is the most compassionate, the most merciful. He is God, other than whom there is no deity, the sovereign, the holy, the all-perfect.
Literally, free from any imperfection, or the security,
The granter of security,
or of safety,
the overseer, the exalted in might, the compeller, the superior. Exalted is God above whatever they associate with him. He is God, the creator, the inventor, the fashioner, to him belong the best names.
As for the names and attributes of God, their translation is surely an impossibility, for even in Arabic, they cannot represent more than an approximation, limited by human understanding. To any description by God of himself in human terminology, the mind is required to apply the concept of absoluteness and perfection befitting him.
Whatever is in the heavens and the earth, is exalting him. And he is the exalted in might, the wise.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed listening to this book, please give it a like, and consider subscribing to the channel, and click the notifications button, so you don't miss out on any other videos.